Struggling to know if you can afford the home renovation or remodel of your dreams? I'm going to share the 7 critical parts you need to include in your budgets so you'll never again be taken by surprise and wonder how you're going to pay for it all. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit the subscribe button and the bell below to be notified every time I post a new video providing direction and clarity on designing and building your dream home. I've honestly built hundreds of construction budgets for new homes, restaurants, offices, coffee shops, hospitals, and I'm super excited to give you the tools to end construction budget paralysis. Let's dive into these 7 critical budget parts. Number 1, your budget starts with your list of work to be completed. The very first thing you need to understand about building a construction budget is that your budget comes from your robust list of work, and that list of work is called your scope of work. For this entire budget building example, I'm going to use a kitchen renovation for a project type because as women, we've all dreamed of a beautiful kitchen and have vision boards to prove it. Now, when I say break down the scope of your kitchen renovation, I don't mean something as simple as demo your kitchen and buy new kitchen cabinets. That's not a detailed list and does not make up a scope of work. I mean physically go into your kitchen and walk through the process that you would need to undertake to take it from where it is currently to where you want it to be. What does that actually look like in detail? Think of things that need to be purchased, things that need to be altered, added into your space, people you might need to hire to do that work. All these items equal your scope of work. In my kitchen example, we have demo the existing, so removing the floor tile, remove the cabinets, remove plumbing fixtures, appliances and lighting, add power and lighting supply, install new cabinets, countertops, backsplash tile, accent lighting, pot lights, installing new plumbing fixtures, hardware, the internal organization components, appliances, floor tile, and then labor for all of that, which would be your electrician, your plumber, your drywaller, tiler, countertops, any of that labor that would be included. The whole kit and caboodle. You're making a very detailed list of everything that needs to go into the kitchen or your project idea. And then the next step is you're going to apply costs to each and every one of these line items as your very first pass at your construction. Costs that we're allocating come from 3 primary areas at this point: past experience, research from the internet, or talking to local suppliers. Our estimates we are making based on what we assume it would cost. This is your first pass at creating your total budget value and is the starting point to move into the next budget items. Number 2, divide your budget into soft costs and hard costs. We then take the detailed scope of work and cost breakdown and we further refine it and add it to the form of soft costs and hard costs. Soft costs represent the skin in the game. It's money that is typically paid up front in the pre-planning phase before your project starts and are costs that you would always be responsible for covering even if your project doesn't go full circle. Think engineering fees, engaging an architect or an interior designer, insurance, service fees, geotechnical, land surveying, site assessments from any consultants or trades to assess feasibility of your project. Hard costs are all costs directly related to the build and construction. So any expenses related to labor, materials, equipment purchase or rentals, and the costs associated with building and fitting out the space to completion. We already started our hard cost budget in phase 1. So at this stage, we start to build on the hard cost by adding any elements we forgot and modifying the cost to actual costs from quotes by suppliers, proposals from contractors, or trades. So we work towards creating and making hard costs as accurate as possible at this stage. Soft costs are honestly the elements of budget building that most people forget to include. We tend to only focus on items that need to be purchased or the people that need to be engaged to create our dream space. And we forget to include the costs that are upfront costs to get the project moving forward and that need to be paid throughout the duration of the project. Number 3. Don't forget to include taxes. Nobody likes paying them, but if you forget to include taxes as part of your tracking budget, you will be forgetting thousands of dollars and left wondering where that money is going to come from. Depending upon where you are located, you either have 2 separate taxes or one lump sum. With GST and PST, GST is charged the whole budget amount, including soft costs, labor, and any purchasable items, while PST is only charged to purchase items by yourself. So appliances, hardware, furniture, accent lighting, plumbing, and so on. If you have two separate taxes, the easiest way is to break out PST to the physical items as separate line items and charge GST to everything to calculate to date, excluding the PST. With one lump sum tax, then the tax value is charged to everything calculated to date. So everything. Before we move on to number 4, I'd love to know what's the biggest budget pitfall you've ever experienced in a project. Comment below. Number 4, shipping, freight, delivery costs, and duties. Another line item that's typically forgotten are the costs associated with items arriving to your house, like shipping, freight charges, duties, and or overseas international goods and delivery costs. In most cases, large suppliers account for the cost within the quotes that are provided to you, so you don't need to pull those out as separate line items. But if you are purchasing anything on your own, you need to factor in the cost for getting that product into your house. So if you are weighing options online and haven't made the purchase yet to know what the shipping charges actually are, then a percentage is added to those line items at this phase of the budget to account for future rates. When it comes to shipping and freight costs, 5% is a good percentage to bank within your budget for shipping. And for duties of international goods, it's safer to buffer for 10% to account for any rising costs. So in our example, the shipping costs are included in line items that are being provided and installed by others. So cabinets, countertops, appliances, tiling. But the products that I would be purchasing directly, so accent lights, bar stools, plumbing fixtures, cabinet hardware, I need to add shipping and freight charges to these items as separate line items. Number 5, add a contingency fund to the budget total. Your contingency fund covers costs that you have identified as possible risks that could occur in your project based on your house's age, your confidence in your design decisions, and items that you know may come up as needing to be fixed and changed, but you're unsure as to the extent or if it would actually happen. These are known as your known unknowns. Think of a contingency fund as a security blanket, and it's there to provide a nice cushion for you if you need it. In our kitchen example, I know that based on the house's age, that there may be asbestos, I could find mold in my plumbing wall that we need to be removed, my electrical panel may need to be upgraded, or a sub panel added for the additional electrical load. And I know that some of the design decisions that I've made may need to change based on what's actually inside the walls once they're opened up. But I don't actually know if any of these items are actually going to happen. They are all possibilities at this point and assumptions. But I still need to account for the possibility that they could happen. So a contingency fund needs to be added to the account for that probability. There are 2 ways of calculating a contingency fund. The first is to break down all the assumptions and risks that could possibly happen and apply a cost value to each of those line items, and then roll up all those costs and make that your final contingency fund. This is incredibly time consuming, and unless you've worked in the construction industry and are an expert at flagging potential risks, there's a high chance that you'll forget the important items and not factor in enough of a cost to cover that expense if it actually were to happen. So the far easier way is to allocate a percentage to the total tracking budget, so your soft costs plus your hard costs, your taxes, and your shipping. The percentage used to calculate your contingency fund will vary based upon the accuracy of the numbers in your budget. If you're at the very beginning phase of your budget and the costs you've plugged in are really estimates based on research and your thought processes, then the percentage needs to be higher, sitting at 20 to 25%. Once your budget becomes more accurate and holds actual quotes and proposal values given to you by people who be working on the project, the contingency percentage can be reduced to 10 to 15%. Some people will tell you to go as low as 5% at this phase. I don't recommend that direction. In a $60,000 kitchen renovation, 5% is only $3,000. $3,000 is not a lot of money and can easily be eaten up by having to deal with asbestos, mold, or plumbing issues. My recommendation is that your contingency should never be lower than 10%, and this percentage is directly related back to the flagged assumptions and risks. If you have a risk in your project that you know is a really high probability of occurring, either give it its own line item in your budget or increase your contingency value overall to 15%. Number 6, escalation costs. Labor and materials will go up. This is one item that everybody forgets and nobody thinks of. If you're not building or renovating in the year that you're developing your budget, you have to account for escalation costs. It's not a question of if prices will increase, it's a question of how much. Escalation costs need to be factored in for supplies, materials, and even labor. So the total tracking budget to date, including your taxes, shipping, and your contingency. Because if escalation occurs, guaranteed all those items will also be affected. Typically, escalation sits normally at 3 to 4% per year. But in the past few years, construction escalation has actually increased to 5.6%. So banking on 5% per year is a safer bet. Escalation costs are accounted for each year there is a delay between the budget development to construction start date. So in our example, the budget was developed in 2023 and the intent to start construction would not be until 2025. That's 2 years that escalation costs have to be factored in at 5% per year. Number 7, don't forget a reserve fund. What's a reserve fund, you might be asking? A reserve fund is like a bubble wrap for your entire project. Your contingency fund is your security blanket for known unknowns, the items that you know could possibly happen, and that bucket of funds you've allocated to cover these costs if they do arise. Your reserve fund is your oh shit fund. It is an additional fund in excess to your contingency that accounts for all those unknown unknowns. So risks that you could never have ever imagined happening and coming up in your project. For example, let's say that in this kitchen renovation, once the tile was removed, it was identified that carpenter ants had eaten away at my subfloor and some of my floor joists that are a large section of the structural integrity of my house. And they now need to be removed and replaced. Is that a risk that I would have identified and factored in as likely to happen? No. Honestly, not in a million years. But it did happen and it needs to be fixed. I never would have banked enough money to cover that occurrence in a contingency fund. So where would these funds have come from? Enter in your reserve fund. A reserve fund is really only meant to be used as on massive project changes and unexpected emergency costs that you honestly could never have assumed would happen. It's a last defense against rising construction costs that eat away at your entire budget value. Without a reserve fund, the only 2 options to find the money to deal with this type of a situation would be to somehow find additional funds through a loan or refinancing a mortgage, or to scrap really large portions of the design or project scope to reduce those expenses and reallocate those funds to the actual problem now. Your reserve fund should sit at 15 to 20% and is charged against the total tracking budget, including your contingency and escalation. It exists and is higher than your contingency fund because it's meant to give you a catch-all to your entire project. The really important thing to understand here is that in any construction project, you have 2 buckets of money. You have your tracking budget bucket and your reserve fund bucket. Your tracking budget is everything minus your reserve fund, so the first 6 parts of your budget. So in one bank account, we place the funds of the tracking budget, and it's what we draw down against as the project starts and is monitored throughout construction against actual costs. So your scope, your taxes, shipping, contingency fund, and your escalation costs. And then we track against it as we get quotes in and the project actually continues. And in a completely separate bank account, preferably one that gets interest, you place your reserve fund. Your reserve fund does not form part of the funds that you have readily available because, as bubble wrap, it's only meant to be used as a last resort against extreme conditions. And then a decision between yourself or yourself and a partner is made to determine if you want to use the reserve fund or make adjustments to the design direction and reallocate the funds within the tracking budget. And that's it. A lot. These are the 7 critical parts you need to include in your home rental, remodeling, or new build projects. Overwhelming? Yes. But also incredibly exciting and liberating because you'll never again go into a home project running out of funds, thinking, oh shit, how am I going to pay for all of this? You know exactly how to set up a whole construction budget to ensure all your bases are covered and you've allocated funds where you need it. If this is exciting to you, let me know in the comments because it's truly exciting to me. It's really the key to building a super strong budget foundation that allows you to plan, forecast, and save up the right amount of funds to see your dream vision become reality. But if you're struggling to know where to start, and if your project idea is even financially feasible, I would love to help you in a personal design strategization session. Click on the link in description and let's deep dive into your project specifics together. The next step is hiring your dream team. So be sure to watch this video next and learn the process to do just that. Thank you so much for watching. Can't wait to read your comments. They're truly my love language, and I'll see you in the next one.